The red lizard was not Ryan's usual spot. He preferred quiet corners, places where the clinking of ice in a glass was the loudest sound. But tonight, a strange pull had led him to this dive bar, a place throbbing with a different kind of life. He sat on a wobbly stool at the far end of the sticky bar, nursing a lukewarm soda. The air was thick with the smell of stale beer and something vaguely like old French fries. Around him, people laughed loudly, their voices battling the thumping bass of the music. Ryan felt a little like a misplaced puzzle piece. His clothes were too neat, his hair too tidy for the scruffy charm of the red lizard. Still, there was a raw energy to the place, a kind of honest chaos that was strangely appealing. He tapped his foot to the beat, letting the sound wash over him. He wasn't looking for trouble or even for company, he was just observing. The music, a gritty rock anthem, pulsed through the floorboards and up into his chest. It wasn't his favorite genre, but tonight it felt right. He took another sip of his soda, his eyes scanning the room, enjoying the unexpected rhythm of the night. Ryan was content to just watch the blurry shapes move around him, lost in the loud music. Then his gaze drifted to the other side of the room. There, leaning against a graffiti-covered pillar, was someone who stood out even in the dim light. This was Leo. He wasn't loud or flashy, but there was a quiet power about him. Leo had dark, messy hair that fell just over his eyes, and a hint of a tattoo peeked from under the sleeve of his worn leather jacket. He held a drink, but his eyes weren't on it. They were sharp, moving, taking everything in. Ryan found himself watching Leo for longer than he meant to. There was something mysterious about him, a sense that he knew more than he let on. Leo's eyes, even from across the crowded room, seemed to hold a deep, intense look. Then, as if he felt Ryan's stare, Leo slowly turned his head. His eyes, dark and knowing, met Ryan's. It was just a glance, but it felt like a jolt, like static electricity in the air. A small, almost invisible smile played on Leo's lips before he turned his attention back to the swirling crowd. Ryan's heart gave an unexpected thump. The music seemed to get louder, and the air in the bar felt suddenly charged. He wondered who this person was and why he felt such a pull towards him. The brief, charged moment with Leo left Ryan feeling a new kind of awareness. He looked around the red lizard again, but this time he noticed more than just the general buzz. The dim lights, mostly from dusty neon signs advertising forgotten beers, cast long, dancing shadows that made it hard to tell faces clearly. The music, a heavy rock beat, was no longer just background noise. It vibrated through the very bones of the building, a physical presence. He could distinctly smell the stale beer that had soaked into the worn carpet and the sticky bar top, mixed with a faint, metallic tang that he couldn't quite place. Laughter still echoed, but now it seemed a little sharper, a little less joyful. There was a low hum beneath the music and the chatter, a subtle shift in the air. People seemed to be moving with a little less ease, their shoulders a bit tighter. Ryan noticed a few heads turning, not to the music, but towards a corner near the pool tables. A quiet murmur started to grow, like a ripple spreading through the crowded room. The easygoing chaos of before was slowly morphing into something else, something heavier. An unfamiliar tension began to coil in the air, making the hair on Ryan's arm stand up just a little. He instinctively tightened his grip on his soda glass, his eyes drawn to the same corner where others were now looking. The low hum of tension Ryan had noticed quickly escalated. Voices from the pool table corner grew louder, sharper, cutting through the music like a broken glass. At first, it was just angry words, then a shove. A man in a torn t-shirt stumbled back, knocking over a chair with a loud clatter that momentarily silenced a small section of the bar. Ryan's eyes widened, a knot forming in his stomach. This wasn't just playful banter, this was real anger. Another shove, harder this time, and a beer bottle crashed against the wall, sending foamy liquid spraying. The music, which had seemed so loud moments ago, now felt like a distant hum as the sounds of shouting and struggling took over. Suddenly, a fist flew, connecting with a sickening thud. The small argument had exploded into a full-blown brawl. Bodies collided, shouts turned into snarls, and the air filled with the sounds of grunts and curses. It was happening too fast, too close. Ryan was still at the bar, not far from the brewing storm. People around him started to scatter, pushing past each other in a desperate attempt to get away from the growing melee. A woman screamed, a high-pitched sound that cut through the noise. Ryan felt frozen, caught between the instinct to flee and the sheer shock of what was unfolding. He watched, wide-eyed, as a chair was flung, barely missing someone's head. The fight was now a swirling mass of angry bodies, and it was getting dangerously close to his spot at the bar. A bottle whizzed past Ryan's ear, shattering against the bar where his head had been just moments before. Shards of glass rained down, sparkling dangerously in the dim light. Ryan flinched, his heart leaping into his throat. He was still frozen, unable to move, his mind struggling to catch up with the sudden, violent reality. The fight was a swirling vortex of flailing limbs and furious shouts, now almost on top of him. He could feel the heat of angry bodies, hear the ragged breaths of men locked in struggle. Just as a large hand reached out from the fray, seemingly aiming for his face, a different hand, strong and sure, clamped around Ryan's wrist. It was Leo. In a blur of motion, Leo yanked Ryan forward, pulling him off the stool with surprising force. Ryan stumbled, barely keeping his balance as he was dragged away from the immediate danger. Leo didn't hesitate, his grip firm, his eyes fixed on a clear path through the scattering crowd. He moved with a practiced ease, weaving between fleeing patrons and dodging stray punches. Ryan, still in a daze, could only follow, his feet scrambling to keep up. He felt a strange mix of fear and relief, a jolt of adrenaline coursing through him. Leo was a solid presence in the chaos, an anchor in the storm, pulling him to safety. Leo continued to pull Ryan through the scattering crowd, his speed and purpose a stark contrast to Ryan's stunned movements. They dodged a flailing arm, sidestepped a falling body, and then with a final, firm tug, Leo propelled Ryan backward. Ryan's back hit something hard and cold, the grimy, brick wall near the restrooms, far from the center of the brawl. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but before he could even register the discomfort, Leo was there, pressing close. Leo's body was a solid, warm presence against Ryan's, trapping him against the wall. The sudden closeness was dizzying, a different kind of shock than the fight itself. Ryan could feel Leo's breath on his face, see the intense focus in his dark eyes. The roar of the fight seemed to dim for a second, pushed to the edges of Ryan's awareness by Leo's immediate proximity. He could feel the strong beat of Leo's heart, matching the frantic rhythm of his own. Their bodies were almost flush, Leo's arms bracing against the wall on either side of Ryan's head, creating a small, safe space in the heart of the storm. The scent of Leo, leather, something woodsy, and a hint of sweat filled Ryan's senses, pushing out the smell of stale beer and fear. He was pinned, breathless, and utterly captivated. Ryan opened his mouth, a startled protest or question forming on his lips. He wanted to ask what was happening, why Leo had pulled him, why they were pressed so close. But before any sound could escape, before he could fully process the feeling of Leo's body against his, Leo's head dipped. Outside their small bubble, the bar was a symphony of destruction. A loud crash echoed as something heavy hit the floor, likely a table. Shouts of anger and pain mingled with the frantic screams of people trying to escape. Bottles shattered, their glass splintering like tiny explosions. The thumping bass of the music, though still playing, now felt like a frantic, desperate heartbeat against the rising tide of chaos. The air crackled with danger, thick with adrenaline and the metallic scent of blood, or maybe just fear. But none of that mattered to Ryan in that instant. Leo's lips, firm and demanding, were suddenly on his. It wasn't a gentle kiss, not a soft inquiry. It was powerful, urgent, silencing any thought or sound Ryan might have made. It was a kiss that tasted of danger and felt like a sudden, scorching fire in the middle of a frozen landscape. Ryan's eyes fluttered shut, the world outside their embrace fading into a distant, muffled roar. The kiss was a sudden, fierce firework in the middle of a war zone. Ryan's senses, already on high alert from the bar fight, were now completely overwhelmed. The roar of the brawl, which had been a deafening clamor, now felt like a distant, angry sea crashing against the shores of his awareness. He could still hear the shouts, the breaking glass, the grunts of struggle, but they were muted, pushed back by the immediate, overwhelming sensation of Leo's lips on his. The thumping bass of the music still vibrated through the floor and wall, a primal rhythm that now seemed to match the frantic beat of Ryan's own heart. His heart was a wild drum, pounding against his ribs, a frantic response to both the danger surrounding them and the shocking, thrilling surprise of Leo's kiss. Every nerve ending in his body was alive, tingling. The soft pressure of Leo's mouth, the slight abrasion of his stubble, the unexpected taste of him, it was all too much and yet not enough. His mind struggled to keep up, to process the sheer audacity of this moment. Here, in the midst of flying fists and shattered dreams, a connection was forging, raw and undeniable. The adrenaline coursing through his veins, a cold wave of fear just moments ago, now ignited into a burning, intoxicating heat. He wasn't just being kissed. He was being consumed by a moment so intense, so out of place, that it felt like the only real thing in the entire bar. The kiss wasn't just a physical act, it was a detonation. A sudden, fierce heat spread through Ryan's body, chasing away the last vestiges of fear and replacing it with something wilder, more compelling. Leo's mouth moved with a confident hunger, a silent demand that Ryan found himself answering without thought. His hands, which had been frozen at his sides, instinctively rose, one clutching Leo's leather jacket, the other finding its way into the soft hair at the nape of Leo's neck. This wasn't a gentle exploration. It was a desperate, urgent connection born from the raw energy of the moment. The danger outside, the crashing sounds, the distant screams, they didn't lessen the passion but rather fueled it, making every touch, every press of lips feel vital and immediate. It was as if all the adrenaline that had been pumping through Ryan's veins, meant for fight or flight, had suddenly found a new outlet, transforming into an electric current between them. A spark, yes, but more like a bonfire erupting from dry kindling. There was a raw, undeniable craving in Leo's kiss, a depth that surprised Ryan. He found himself sinking into it, giving back as much as he received, lost in the unexpected ferocity of the moment. It was a kiss that promised secrets and danger, a sudden, powerful ignition of something that felt both brand new and anciently familiar. As Leo's kiss deepened, the frantic world outside them began to lose its sharp edges. The flashing neon lights of the bar blurred into streaks of color, no longer individual signs but a vibrant, indistinct halo around their private moment. The shouts and crashes of the fight, once so jarring, became a dull, rhythmic thrum, like the distant waves of a turbulent ocean. It was background noise, a wild, chaotic symphony playing just for them, emphasizing the stillness and intensity of their embrace. Ryan felt as if he were suspended in time, a tiny, quiet pocket of passion in the heart of a storm. The grime of the wall pressing against his back, the sweat on Leo's skin, the metallic tang in the air, all these harsh realities faded, replaced by the overwhelming sensation of Leo's lips, his hands, his breath. Their bodies, pressed together, formed an unbreakable shield against the madness. Everything beyond Leo's touch, beyond the circle of their shared heat, became irrelevant. The urgency of the kiss grew, a silent conversation speaking volumes amidst the cacophony. It was a promise, a question, a desperate answer all rolled into one. The dive bar, with its sticky floors and broken dreams, transformed into a stage for their sudden, unexpected drama. The danger wasn't gone, but it no longer felt threatening. Instead, it served as a wild, thrilling canvas for the explosive connection igniting between two strangers. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the cacophony of the bar began to change. The shouts grew less frequent, the crashes less violent. The distinct sound of breaking glass gave way to the shuffling of feet and the low grumble of angry voices. It was as if the storm was passing, leaving behind its messy aftermath. The music, still thumping, started to reclaim its dominance, though now it sounded slightly hollow, a beat without the frantic energy of before. But within the tight circle of Ryan and Leo's embrace, the energy was anything but diminished. The adrenaline that had surged through Ryan when the fight began, and then transformed into a fiery passion during the kiss, still pulsed fiercely through his veins. His heart hammered against his ribs, not with fear, but with a dizzying mix of excitement and disbelief. Leo's grip on him, though still firm, had softened slightly, but the intensity in his kiss remained. Ryan could feel Leo's breath, now a little ragged, against his cheek. The world outside might be settling, but their world was still spinning. The danger had receded, yet the heightened senses, the tingling skin, the electric current between them, were all still very much alive. The quietening of the bar only seemed to amplify the loud thrum of their own connection, a private storm brewing even as the public one died down. This moment born of chaos felt too significant to simply fade away with the dwindling fight. Slowly, Leo pulled back, his lips leaving Ryan's with a soft, lingering pressure. The air between them, thick with shared breath and unspoken questions, seemed to crackle. Ryan's eyes fluttered open, his vision slowly clearing from the haze of passion. They were both breathing hard, chests heaving, as if they'd just run a race or fought a battle themselves. The lingering taste of Leo, a mix of something wild and sweet, still clung to Ryan's mouth. Their gazes locked. Leo's eyes, dark and deep, held a new kind of intensity, a knowing look that seemed to pierce right through Ryan. There was no embarrassment, no awkwardness, just a profound, silent understanding that passed between them. In that shared glance, 1,000 words were spoken without a single sound. Ryan saw a vulnerability in Leo he hadn't expected, a flicker of something raw and honest that mirrored his own churning emotions. And in Leo's eyes, Ryan saw a reflection of himself changed. No longer the quiet observer, the out-of-place puzzle piece. He was someone who had just experienced something extraordinary, something that had cracked open his world. A new understanding dawned on him. This wasn't just a random act, a desperate grab for safety. This was a moment of connection, forged in fire and chaos, a profound and unexpected beginning. The lingering heat of Leo's kiss warmed his face, and a strange, thrilling certainty settled in his heart. As their eyes met, the bar around them slowly came back into focus, no longer a blurred backdrop, but a scene of quiet devastation. The once thrumming music had finally sputtered to a halt, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. The floor was a treacherous mosaic of broken glass, glittering malevolently under the dim lights. Overturned chairs lay scattered like fallen soldiers, their legs pointing accusingly at the ceiling. A table near the center of the room was completely upended, its contents, empty glasses, spilled drinks, and a few scattered playing cards, strewn across the sticky floor. The air, once thick with the smell of stale beer and adrenaline, now carried a faint, acrid scent, perhaps from a spilled drink or a small electrical short. People stood frozen in various states of shock or recovery, some nursing bruised knuckles, others wiping blood from their faces. A few brave souls cautiously stepped around the debris, looking for friends or a safe exit. The raw, violent energy had dissipated, replaced by a heavy, almost reverent quiet. It was the calm after the storm, but the storm had left its mark. The Red Lizard, usually a place of rowdy enjoyment, now looked like a war zone, a testament to the sudden, destructive power of human anger. Still pressed against the wall, their eyes locked, Ryan and Leo were a strange island of calm in the disarray. Around them, the bar was a tableau of aftermath. People gingerly stepping over debris, a bartender surveying the damage with a weary sigh, and a few lingering, tense faces. Yet none of that chaos seemed to touch Ryan and Leo. They stood close, Leo's presence still a warm, solid shield, and Ryan realized with a jolt that they were the only two people in the entire Red Lizard who weren't focused on the broken glass or the bruised egos. They were still caught in their own bubble, a silent world woven from shared adrenaline and that startling kiss. The raw intensity of the moment had carved out a space just for them, making the wreckage of the bar feel strangely distant, almost like a movie scene. Ryan felt no urge to check for injuries, no desire to join the murmuring crowd. His gaze was fixed on Leo, and Leo's on him, a silent communication passing between them that transcended the physical damage of the fight. It was an odd feeling, this detachment, as if the fight had happened to everyone else, but for them, it had merely set the stage for something entirely different. They were observers of the chaos, yet deeply involved in their own private, passionate consequence. The fight had been a catalyst, not a crisis, for them. Leo finally broke the silence, his voice a low rumble that cut through the bar's stunned quiet. "Are you all right?" he asked, his dark eyes searching Ryan's face, a hint of concern softening their usual intensity. Ryan swallowed, his throat dry. I think so," he managed, his own voice a little shaky. What was that?" He wasn't just asking about the kiss, but everything, the pull, the rescue, the raw passion. Leo's gaze held his unwavering. "Chaos," he simply stated, a wry twist to his lips. "And then you." A flush spread across Ryan's cheeks. The answer was both vague and perfectly clear. Unspoken questions hung heavy in the air between them, questions about why, about what now, about the electric current that still hummed beneath his skin. There was a challenge in Leo's eyes, a silent dare for Ryan to acknowledge the depth of what had just happened. Why did you do that?" Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible above the shuffling feet and low murmurs of the other patrons. Leo leaned in just a fraction, his voice dropping even lower. "Because you looked like you needed saving," he murmured, his eyes flicking down to Ryan's lips for a fleeting moment before meeting his gaze again. "And I needed a distraction." The words were simple, yet they carried a weight that vibrated through Ryan. It wasn't an explanation, but it was an invitation. With those words, "and I needed a distraction," hanging in the air, a new kind of tension settled between them, different from the bar's lingering unease. It was a tension of anticipation, of unspoken possibilities. Leo's hand, which had been resting casually on the wall beside Ryan's head, moved. His fingers brushed against Ryan's, a light, almost accidental touch that sent a fresh jolt through Ryan's system. Then, with a gentle but firm grasp, Leo interlaced their fingers. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes. Without another word, Leo began to move, pulling Ryan subtly away from the grimy wall and towards the exit. Ryan followed without question, his hand fitting perfectly into Leo's. They moved together, a quiet unit amidst the still disoriented crowd. They stepped carefully over the broken glass and around the overturned furniture, their linked hands a silent promise, a shared secret. The chaos of the Red Lizard, with its stunned patrons and the lingering smell of spilled beer, faded behind them. Ryan didn't look back. His focus was entirely on Leo, on the firm grip of his hand, on the broad shoulders leading him away. The noise of the bar, the aftermath of the fight, the curious glances from other patrons, none of it mattered. He was being led, not just out of a bar, but out of a moment of danger and into something new, something unknown, with a stranger who no longer felt like a stranger at all. The heavy door of the Red Lizard swung shut behind them with a muffled thud, cutting off the lingering sounds of the bar. One moment, Ryan was in a world of dim lights, sticky floors, and the distant echo of chaos. The next, he was bathed in the cool, crisp embrace of the night air. The contrast was startling, almost physical. The suffocating warmth and cacophony inside were replaced by a refreshing breeze and an almost absolute silence. He took a deep, shaky breath, filling his lungs with the clean, cool air. The smell of exhaust fumes and damp earth was a welcome change from stale beer and human fear. Above them, the streetlights cast long, yellowish glows on the wet pavement, reflecting the recent rain. The only sounds were the distant hum of city traffic and the gentle rustle of leaves in the trees nearby. It was a world away from the Red Lizard, a peaceful calm after the storm. Still holding Leo's hand, Ryan turned to face him, his heart still thrumming a fast, excited beat against his ribs. The quiet allowed him to hear his own heartbeat, loud and clear. He could also hear Leo's steady breathing next to him, a grounding presence. The adrenaline was slowly ebbing, leaving a pleasant warmth in its place. The silence felt enormous, almost sacred, after the sensory overload they had just experienced. It was a space to think, to feel, to simply be. In the cool quiet of the night, with the bar's chaos now a memory, Ryan and Leo stood facing each other. Their hands were still intertwined, a silent anchor between them. Leo's dark eyes, which had been so intense and knowing inside, now held a softer yet equally deep gaze. He didn't speak, but his eyes spoke volumes. They held a question, a promise, and a hint of something wild and untamed. Ryan looked back, his heart still doing a strange dance in his chest. He felt a pull towards Leo that was stronger than anything he'd ever known. It wasn't just the thrill of the danger or the shock of the kiss. It was something deeper, a recognition, perhaps, of a kindred spirit in the most unlikely of places. He saw a shared excitement in Leo's eyes, a spark that mirrored his own. A small smile, slow and gentle, spread across Leo's face. It wasn't the wry twist he'd given earlier, but a genuine warmth that reached his eyes. He squeezed Ryan's hand lightly. The gesture was fleeting, but it carried a weight of unspoken meaning. It was a silent agreement, a quiet understanding that this was not the end of their story. This was just the beginning. The lingering look between them was a promise, clear as the streetlights above, that there was much more to explore. As Leo's soft smile faded, replaced by that familiar intense gaze, Ryan felt a swirling mix of emotions. Confusion was definitely there. How could so much have happened in such a short time? A dive bar, a fight, a stranger, a kiss. It was like a scene ripped from a movie, too wild to be real. Yet it was real, undeniably real, leaving a physical ache of longing in his chest. But stronger than the confusion was a thrilling excitement. His heart, still beating a rapid tattoo, wasn't just from the adrenaline of escaping the fight. It was a joyful, anticipatory thrum, a buzzing energy that made him feel more alive than he had in years. This was an adventure, unexpected and thrilling, pulling him far from his usual quiet life. And beneath it all, a strange sense of destiny settled upon him. It wasn't a logical thought, more like a deep, intuitive knowing. It felt as if every quiet night he had spent alone, every careful step he had taken, had been leading him to this moment, to this bar, to this chaos, and to Leo. As if the universe had conspired to throw them together, two strangers bound by a sudden, undeniable spark. He didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, Ryan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. It was a feeling both terrifying and utterly exhilarating. Leo's smile deepened slightly, and he squeezed Ryan's hand again, a silent question in his eyes. Ryan, still reeling from the rush of feelings, found himself nodding almost imperceptibly. He didn't know what this meant or where it would lead, but he knew he wanted to find out. The calm, quiet night suddenly felt full of endless possibilities. Without a word, Leo began to walk, his pace unhurried but purposeful. Ryan fell into step beside him, their hands still linked. The rhythmic swing of their arms felt natural, comfortable, as if they had walked this way 1,000 times before. They moved away from the red lizard, its neon glow fading into the background, leaving the lingering scent of stale beer and adrenaline behind. The city around them was a canvas of muted lights and distant sounds, a stark contrast to the small, intense world they had just left. Ryan glanced at Leo, whose profile was etched sharply against the streetlight glow. He still knew nothing about this man, his name even felt like a whispered secret. But he felt a connection, a pull that went beyond logic or reason. The journey ahead was unknown, shrouded in the mystery of shared glances and a kiss born of chaos. But for Ryan, as he walked beside Leo into the quiet promise of the night, it felt like the most exciting adventure of his life was just beginning.